So we'll go into the meat of the presentation here. And so we've broken it up into three chunks. So I'll go first and talk about within healthcare and integrated project delivery, what we've learned. So starting in healthcare, I think these things are fairly general, though. They should apply in any type of construction project and actually even outside of the design and construction industry. So a lot of what we've learned is if people don't know each other and they are just working via email and sending things back and forth, there's a lot of latency in decision making. Things sometimes don't make sense, or there's different meanings. People assume different things. And so we've gone to a co-location model. So the upper left-hand corner is the 7,000 square foot trailer complex. That is just for one project. So on the right-hand side, the upper right is what that looks like. We have 7 companies, including the owner's project team with facilities operations, as well as a project management group. So there's actually 8 companies, and they're working as a single virtual company. So the lower left, you can see this is a group meeting where you've got representatives from more than 8 companies that come and join together once a month. We do trainings as a team. We celebrate. We have what we call the First Friday Fandango, which is just a get together and team building event. And then on the right is just to show you a little bit more about this is a virtual company within this trailer. So we've got the plotter and the plan viewing area. And what we're trying to do is get people to think project first instead of company first. So the project becomes its own company. We've also found that transparency. So most of the work that we do is on an open book basis. A lot of people haven't exposed their numbers before. So we start as the owner, we lead by example. So in the lower left is us actually putting what our project budget is up on the board, showing the team how much contingency we have, showing them that we're going to show them exactly what we're working with. And so this is a picture of a contract negotiation between 5 different companies who are exposing their profit. They're going to put 100% of their profit at risk on this project. And so they need to see what the other partners have in their budgets and what the owner has. So transparency is important. The owner needs to lead by being the first one to basically show their numbers. And then we focus a ton on building culture. I think in the beginning, we thought that if we just put everyone in the same room, they would just naturally become a team. And I think it does happen, but it takes maybe 18 months to 24 months. And so if you want it to happen faster, you need to consciously work with the team. So we've co-located people, but then we're doing joint trainings together. And so we're learning as a team. And on the bottom is just examples of ways that we've celebrated and played together. So the lower left, we went to the driving range to Top Golf when we got the contract signed. It was a big milestone. That middle, that's the project manager for the owner and the superintendent for the general contractor. And they came to work as twins one day. So that doesn't typically happen in a contentious project. And then we also have a monthly poker tournament in the evening after the work is done. So that's the big room, big ideas. Within these teams, we do actually have to work too. We don't get to play all the time. And so we have a major focus on planning reliability. So these are ways that we're tracking the reliability of the team's ability to make decisions when they said they would make them and to make advances in the design and hand that information off. So we're tracking what we call the planned percent complete, which is on a 1-week look ahead, what percentage of the actions that we said we were going to do did we actually do? And then this graph also tracks what we call committed required. So if we have a critical path design schedule, what percentage of the the critical path on the schedule are we actually saying that we're going to do within the next week. And so if we're not committing to do the required work, then we're slipping. And all of that is really only valuable if you're tracking the reasons why things aren't getting done. And so this is the feedback loop into the planning process of why aren't things getting done so we can fix them. And then there's a major focus on continuous improvement. So this is just an example of what we call plus deltas. At the end of every single meeting that our teams have, whether it's an owner meeting or an equipment meeting or a design meeting. So a plus is something that worked well in the meeting that we want to continue. A delta is something that didn't work well and we want to change. So if you get in the habit of doing plus deltas after every meeting, over time, you get really efficient and things work significantly better. And then the last piece is we assess the team. So it's challenging because this is very qualitative stuff. So do people trust each other? So this is one example. We worked with the Table Group, which is Patrick Lencioni's company. He wrote The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So this is one project where we did an assessment at the end of 2016. And we found the team thought that they were getting good results and there was good commitment level, but we had areas of work within trust, conflict, and accountability. And so we implemented specific countermeasures to try to improve those things and hold each other more accountable. And so we assessed the team a year later and the results were significantly better. There's lots of ways to do this. You'll learn more this morning, or this morning for me, this afternoon for many of you. This is one way to do it. So now we're going to move into manufacturing.
Thank you, James. So let me give you an overview of my experience in manufacturing industries, for instance, automotive. Since industries are very heterogeneous, we've tried a lot to define what is an effective project team. Of course, it was not an easy task, but we tried to condense it into a simple sentence. An effective project team is a group of people using a standard set of tools managed toward same shared goals. So we are here having 3 elements. One is the standard set of tools that you can see in the picture with the violet bubble. It's a toolkit. It's like if you're driving, if you want to go from A to B, that's the engine, that's the car. Then the team is managed. So there is, let's say, a steering mechanism in the car that it's taking what the actions of the driver are into the wheels. Which means rules, processes, and measures. For instance, what are the indicators that help us to understand are we going into the right direction? And the last but not least, they are sharing the same goals. Therefore, the people element, the people which are sharing a certain culture and behaviors to aim at the increasingly higher level of performance. And of course, by saying that, also meaning a continuous improvement process. It's undergoing and it's making the project better and better. Now, if this is the definition that we have created, the question was, okay, what do we see when we arrive and how do we want to bring that team to perform even better? Typically the projects that have been involved that I've not seen from the very beginning to the very end were projects that were already somehow distressed. So there was already something that was not going well. Not often and not always because of the team dynamics, but very often because the scope was increasing, the design was too complex, and therefore the profitability of that investment was not anymore as it was set at target. The first thing to do in that case was to make sure that all the elements for an effective project team are in place. This can only happen by having an assessment tool, which is something standardized that you can apply different phases of the same project, but also in different projects so that you can learn also how the dimensions of the assessment bring to certain performance of the project, and therefore you can also set what are the best practices. So we have developed an assessment tool and then gave it also to the project managers to make sure that the standards that have been defined as best practices are also kept alive. On the next page, you see a picture of this, a part of it. I'm not today talking about the toolkit, which is not part of this webinar today, but more rather focusing on the management and people side. If you see what are the elements that we have put into assessment, on the management, we talk about performance management. So how are the KPIs of the project defined? Not only the results KPI, but also the process KPI. So those KPIs that are helping to steer the process and to control the process in order then to create the results that are expected. How the people are behaving if there are deviations. So how do you bring the people together to talk about deviations, to talk about gaps, and to find solutions for that. The same aspect is on the people side. So we're talking about how do we define the targets for the people and how do we define the incentives? Since we are looking at teams that are very multidisciplinary. If you think about an investment project for a new factory in automotive, for instance, typically this development is done also with the product. So you have people that are looking at process, so manufacturing engineers, but also people that are in parallel designing and finalizing the product. You can imagine the level of interdisciplinary. These people are typically not working together, and therefore we must have, since they are all contributing to the same target, have aligned incentives. Third point is on organizational structure. In a team like that, you have a lot of interfaces towards the outside world. This is an important part. In an automotive project, you have most of the organization of the team itself is within the company. And then the team needs to effectively interface with all the other suppliers that are taking a part of the investment. But typically the most important interfaces or the way, the mechanism must work within the organization, which makes it a little bit easier then to create rules, because at the end they are all persons belonging to the same organization that at the end report to the same person sooner or later. That is an important part. Design it in a proper way. Continuous improvement process, as mentioned before, understanding what is the waste and where is the waste in the organization in developing that project. There are often a lot of waste. If you can imagine, if a team, for instance, is not co-located, like in the case that James was mentioning, so they are in different locations, there is a lot of waste because people, if they don't meet, they tend to react rather late to informations that are flowing through email or to even if they are managed through chat applications. It's still important to minimize the waste. It's also important to understand if the organization has too many different interfaces and a single job needs to go through several stages. Try to make it in one flow without too many people that are involved. So having the project team with the eyes open to recognize what is the waste and how to improve it, it's absolutely important. When we look at people, we are talking about actually 4 elements. One is the alignment. So how is the top management giving the message regarding what is important to achieve for that investment project? What are the targets? Is more capex reduction, or is it more profitability increase, or is more timely start of production? So it must be a sound information coming from top management. This also is translated into communication program. This also, communication means also outwards. So from the team itself to the outside stakeholders. we look at how is effective the communication, how are the people of the team involved in creating, for instance, a bi-weekly newsletter to inform all the others what is the progress of the project. Capabilities, we talk about capability building, and also we talk about, are these people informed about what is the standard way, the stage gate process, for instance, to lead a project like this. This is also coming into the assessment. In the assessment, typically we describe what are the best practices, so that people can still define what is the target that they should achieve. And we clarify with this what is the concrete stage that you should be, and what are the behaviors that you should have in order to achieve that best practice level. In the next page, we have a few examples. I think we don't need to go and read everything inside that. Maybe only one part on the continuous improvement process. As we learn from a Toyota production system, it's important that everybody that is involved, it's creating a certain improvement proposal in a certain period. And therefore also to make sure that these project teams are performing well, we ask to each participant, to each team member, to suggest improvement proposals, and we monitor the frequency of these. This is, for instance, one example of a process indicator, which is not yet talking about the concrete economical result, but it's helping us to monitor how do we come to those results, how do we improve in this case. The next page, we are talking about a simple, an example of what it's called RACI matrix. RACI stands for Responsible, Accountable, Consulted, and Informed, and it's describing the flow of a certain process that needs to be delivered and who is involved in that process. And you can see in this page there are different functions, different roles that might be involved in an investment project. And for this one process, we have been linking with arrows the different roles that are needed for a certain reason. And you see there are responsible resources, there are accountable, and so if you follow the flow, you will see that there are also many different interfaces that happen. So every time that you change interface, the risk is that the person that needs to deal with that request or with that job is not available or is not setting the highest priority to that one flow, and therefore there might be a delay. The target here is also to say, okay, let's clarify what are the minimum amount of resources that are needed, and making sure that there is a clear rule of prioritization so that, for instance, delays are not happening. Last example that I have on this one, it's regarding alignment and role modeling. Top management involvement, one important part, role modeling of the senior managers, for instance, participating on problem-solving activities when we see that there are gaps toward the targets, as well, senior management available. I've seen in many projects or in many organizations quite a risky behavior, which is the top management is available only at the given frequency because there is already a review meetings calendar that has been already decided. And this is valid for all the projects that at that time are developed by that organization. It means if one of these projects is having a delay and they need a quick decision, it's difficult to find the attention of the top management because it's not eventually happening, that meeting, within a short period of time. Here you can define escalation rules so that at least you have somebody to decide, even if it's not the full steering meeting. But it's on the other hand important that there is a mechanism that guarantees that top management is available when there is a request, which is an important request in order not to delay a project. Communication program, as mentioned before, we want to see that there is something in place and the team members are actively involved in the organization to collect the information that we want from the team to explain to the outside world, and to make sure that people, especially if these people outside will be somehow involved in the change, that they also know what is going to happen, to avoid that we are creating misunderstanding, or even worse, if we're creating fears regarding the new environment where these people need to work. So this is a short story that recalls our learnings from automotive industry and discrete manufacturing industry. I would like now to hand over so that we can talk about oil, gas, mining. So let's say the heavy infrastructure, the continuous process type of industry.
Freek?
Sorry, let me unsilence myself. Right. So a lot of the projects that we are involved in are typically quite long duration projects. Some of them a person can be involved for up to 10 years maybe, or at least 5 or 6 years. And during that time, these are some of the things that we found happens a lot. So you just get a bit tired in the project. Project is a high stress, high activity type of environment, and long hours and so on. So people often are so keen about the project, they work and work, and they never go on leave and those things. So we've implemented some of these things. I'll just quickly run through them. For example, a compulsory leave calendar, to be aware of the health and wellness of the people on the team. And again, a thing that people often neglect is their health. And boredom, repetitive work. Very often projects, the front end of projects, take longer than one anticipates, and there's a lot of rework and things in there, which tend to sort of, get people to lose focus, or they get a bit disenchanted and so on. And like with these co-located teams and those sort of things, people work there in the field on the project. They're not near their home office. They're not near their functional managers and so on. And because of that, they often get out of the mainstream. So when promotions comes and recognition for the work and performance assessments and things, their bosses in the function often sort of are not totally aware of what they're doing. They neglect training and all these sort of things. Family support, also a thing. Very often the family is away from the person on the project. So there are two types of things there. The one is support for the family that's away, and support for the guy who sits on the project, and see how we can make that a bit more effective. Personalities in teams often can be a big problem. Some people just don't like to work with other people, or they find them sort of incompatible, and often it's a misunderstanding between the people more than that, and to create an understanding of how the people function, how they understand it, understand their personalities, so that they can really sort of understand why people are making certain comments or act as they act, and these sort of things, and to make sure you have a full complementary team. And the other problem is often when you bring a big engineering contractor into a team for an owner and so on, the contractors have a certain culture, the owner have a certain culture. The two businesses have different objectives also. And somehow you must, as James said, get all these people to work together for the project. But in the end, they also must support their company. It doesn't help to work for the project and the company goes bankrupt type of thing. So there has to be a good understanding of the different cultures, and not just company cultures, but also people from different countries. These days we work with teams where there are people from say, the East, from Europe, from the Americas, from Africa, all working on one team with very different cultural backgrounds that one has to be aware of. So those are just some of the things that I think typically happen on these projects that one has to keep an eye out for.
So we thought to start with that slide to give you a bit of a sense of the sort of project realities we've experienced, which takes us into the owner team consultation team effectiveness model. Now, I'd like to start in the middle with the signs and symptoms. Typically, right at the bottom, the first things that let management think there's something wrong is a cost overrun, a schedule slip, or a quality slip. But typically, underneath that lies things like absenteeism, safety incidents, burnout, or personnel turnover. And if you go and delve a bit deeper and try and find out why are you experiencing these symptoms and signs, most of the time it's because of misalignment. And Freek explained now as well, you know, you're working with multiple companies in this sort of scenario, multiple contractors, each have their own objectives. Most of the sort of projects we work on also are in a program context. So you've got multiple business units within a larger business, and they each have their own objectives. So getting that sort of alignment and avoiding that sort of team conflict is really important. And the question is, how can we measure this? And if you focus your attention to the left-hand side, again, with the examples Freek have mentioned, personal wellness, we see on oil and gas and large manufacturing projects to be a huge issue, especially because of work away from home and the long duration of the project fatigue that sets in. So it's very important for us to look at personal wellness and understanding, you know, what's the health like of the people on the project. We would annually do health assessments where we do blood pressure, cholesterol, etc., to make sure the guys on the team is doing well, and where we can step in and help them and support them, we do that. So work-life balance, we look at personalities, as we've said, also in terms of how personalities fit into teams and how they work together, life events, and then social support, all the stuff that Freek has already mentioned. The second element is the actual job environment. So if I'm working in HR, what is my management like? What does my traveling schedule look like? What's my job stability in my job? What's the sort of job demands do I face in my job? And what's the health and safety factors affecting me? You know, if I'm working in a mine and there's a lot of exposure to health hazards, what are those? The third environment is the actual project environment. Now, you might say, well, it's one of the four. Yes, but these different environments impact each other. So in the project environment, we go and look at what does the leadership look like. Both James and Davida spoke about having clear direction, clear leadership, clear sponsorship, management showing the way. So it's very important to have that clear sponsorship in place, that the planning is in place for the project. There's proper execution plans, proper schedules. It's well integrated. The organization is set up well. People know what they're supposed to do. They understand their roles and responsibilities, like Davida explained. Are the necessary control systems in place to control your cost and your schedule and your quality? Are your stakeholder management mechanisms in place to make sure that all internal and external stakeholders are managed efficiently? And lastly, your stage gate methodologies, are they in place so that you know what I need to do in this stage of the project and what I need to deliver? So it's clear, so that there's no confusion and uncertainty, because the moment there's uncertainty in a project, and that's on any one of these levels, people don't know who the leaders are, what they want to achieve with this project. The plans are not clear. They don't know by when they have to do it. They don't know who they have to work with. They don't know which stakeholders to engage. They don't know what they need to deliver by the end of a stage. That creates a lot of unsettling emotions, which can then cause serious lack of team effectiveness. But this is not the last. Then we look at the work environment, and typically, especially in the mining environment and to some extent in the oil and gas, we've got a cyclical business nature. And because of that, there's a lot of organizational changes, a lot of reorganizations, and these sort of things have got a direct impact on your project morale and what happens on projects. It's got an impact on the project resourcing, what tools they use to control, etc. So organizational change, HR practices, company culture, really important and has an impact. So we end up measuring all of these, but we can't stop there. Now, what do we do with this information? If you focus your attention to the right-hand side of the slide, those are the interventions that we use proactively to ensure project team effectiveness. We can use them reactively as well, but we prefer to use them proactively. And that is sound leadership, sponsorship, having somebody that sets the scene, that excites the guys, get them all powered up about the project, that clearly defines the boundaries of the project through the framing and alignment process. So facilitating that process, making sure all stakeholders are aligned. Team development is very important, and in our last slide, we'll reflect back a little bit on team effectiveness. We already spoke a bit about effective management and control. HR interventions plays a very big role. Freek mentioned some examples. Simple thing like a leave calendar can have a huge impact on the effectiveness of a team, because you can prevent burnout and you can actually prevent that people get disengaged. Having an integrated wellness program whereby you monitor the wellness of your team members throughout the project lifecycle, and then proper stakeholder engagement and communication. So our philosophy is, at the start of the project, you plan each of these to ensure that you set your project up for success. So we spoke about the sponsor there in the middle, and there's been a lot of research done on the importance of the role of the sponsor. And according to the PMI Pulse research that was done in 2014, they said some of the most important actions that a sponsor can take is to remove roadblocks. Davida mentioned that in his presentation, where he said, you know, it's important that the rules are there, you know, who can make certain decisions and remove roadblocks when it's necessary. Helping the team understand alignment of the project or program to the organization strategy. That's probably one of the most important roles of a project sponsor, because he or she needs to show the guys, listen, this is why we are doing this, and this is how it's supporting the bigger organization. So championing the project, adding resources when it's needed, and hopefully that guy or girl has the clout to do that when it's required, and being able to act quickly to resolve issues. Now, I've added this picture on the right. Recognition is so important, and for a sponsor to be visible on a project and to use every possible opportunity to recognize people, what he's actually then doing is he's motivating people and he's getting them excited to work on a project. And that's what I personally want from a sponsor. Make me excited about the project so that I want to work with you.
Yeah, Davida, I think also a very important point on a sponsor is to shield the project from outside noise and disturbances. That project team must focus on delivering what they must do. And very often you get a lot of noise or questions or, you know, all sorts of things from outside the project team. And the sponsor must make sure the team keeps focused on what they must do. And if some change has to happen, you must make sure that's introduced all in a structured way, I would say. You know, so otherwise the team gets very confused if they hear all this noise and questions and so on.
That's the same in healthcare. I often joke that the majority of my job is to keep the hospital away from the project so the team can get the project done.
Yeah.
Very well. Okay, so again, we thought about how we're going to present this, and we thought we'd rather show you some examples. Now, in the first webinar, we spoke about framing and alignment, and that is probably one of the most important initiatives you can take to ensure team effectiveness, is doing proper framing and doing proper alignment throughout the project lifecycle. Our personal preference is not to do team building for the sake of team building, to go and river raft and everybody comes back, have a beer and they're all happy. Yes, you will get people to maybe relate a bit better to one another, but the real team building happens around the planning of the job. So sit people down in a room exactly like James and them do, and let them plan the job together. Let them thrash out those roles and responsibilities. We've at times had 100 people in one room on a large program where we sat together, thrashed out the objectives, made sure everybody is clear on the business objectives, understand the project objectives, understand their roles relative to the execution of the project. And in this exercise, people do form a bond, and they do go through the team development phases of norming, forming, storming, and performing. And what's interesting is that in this process, especially in our environment, we work a lot with virtual teams. So eventually the guys won't sit in one room like James have explained. They'll be all across the world. But if you can get them together initially to spend quite a bit of time together to thrash out the frame, you can greatly set yourself up for success for these guys to effectively work in a virtual manner going forward.
Okay, this is my slide again. So one of the important things that we have spoken about is around a proper structure for the what has happened here? A proper structure for the project and how one works through that. And it really starts with a board that has approved the project. The board you have to convince of the project's proper, need of the project and so on. We normally have a executive committee and a steering committee, whatever we call it, and so on. And then you have the project sponsor. We spoke about that important part. Then we normally have two teams almost. There is the technical team that must implement the project, the hardware and all those things. And then there is the business team. And the business team are the guys that will operate the plant, that will sell the product, that will obtain the raw materials and all these sort of things. And very often these two teams don't work together very well. So we put them under the sponsor. The sponsor is ultimately accountable for the project, and he must make sure that what the technical people deliver is what the business want and what the business can actually work with what the project team will deliver. And these two teams work together. And as you can see there on the left and right hand side, on the project side, the technical side, the financial side, all these sort of things. And that there's proper communication, as Davida said, up and down, and also functional feedback, because in a big organization, all these people work on the project still report to their functional managers. So it gets like a two-dimensional matrix type of organization, and one has to work on this and make sure the structure and the communications are maintained. Right. And then the next point is really around what is an integrated project team. If you actually have a team, and I alluded to it on the previous slide, where all the technical guys work, but the business guys and the operation guys are not involved, then you have a gap in your team, and you are going to deliver something that doesn't work in the end as a whole, or whatever functions are really not there. And IPA has done a lot of research on this, where they say an effective team has to be an integrated team with all the functions required to deliver a proper business solution that will deliver the business objectives. And on the right hand side we have that circle type of thing where we're trying to depict what is an integrated team. So if I can just quickly talk around that. So you have the project sponsor, you have the project management team, then you have what we normally put in four quadrants, if you want to. The business guys look after the business development, the business systems, the financial systems. These are all the things that you need to run the business. Then you have the people that will operate and maintain the facility. Then you have the project team with all their different functionalities in it. the project management stuff and all those sort of things, and then the engineering team who actually designs and implements the systems and get the equipment manufactured and so on. And what one really would like to do is get all these functions working together in an aligned team focusing on the objectives of the project. That is not an easy job, and one has to work on it all the time, as we have said before also. Thanks, James. Right, so one of the aspects we've had a lot of problems with or difficulties with is around roles and responsibilities. So on the roles and responsibilities, we really look at various ways of doing that. And on the left-hand side, you can see this was for a big program where we had an owner team, we had a managing contractor, we had an operations and commissioning team, and we had various engineering contractors for different aspects of the program. And we're trying to say when are which people involved through which stages and what is the key deliverables for each stage so that we could understand that. And then we worked in different ways of depicting the roles and responsibilities. And Davide spoke about the RACI. Then there was a RACI where they had the support and consult and inform. And a way to depict responsibilities we found on big projects and programs that we think work very well is what we call a LACTI. So a LACTI has one key differentiating point, I would say, and that is somebody has to lead the task. So if you have various companies with various people on a specific task, the lead guy is the guy that must make sure that this activity happens. He doesn't necessarily do any physical work except sort of coordinating or checking that it happens. There can only be one lead guy in a LACTI. The accountable person is the one that should approve, consult. You can ask this guy for advice. You don't have to follow his advice. Task is the guys that must actually do the job. So there can be 3 or 4 or 5 people tasked in a certain activity to perform certain things. And inform is, people that you must keep up to date about what is happening. And I think this lead aspect we found very useful, as I said before, in making sure that work gets done and gets done on time. And I think that's what we try and use on most big projects now, is this LACTI way of depicting responsibilities. Thanks, James.
Okay, another very important part to ensure project team effectiveness is communication. Now, this is a role I've personally played on a few projects, and that is from day one to start putting the project contact list together. And this may sound like a very menial task, but it's actually a massive job because new people come on board, some people go off, some are on full-time, some are on part-time, and to try and keep track of this throughout the project lifecycle is difficult, but it needs focused attention. Somebody needs to do this. There needs to be a project administrator whose job it is that keep it up to date, because to be able to access somebody you need on the project at short notice is always important. So having this up to date together with your distribution lists that you may set up on Outlook for specific groupings within your project is really important. And then, of course, your communication protocol. Davide also alluded to that earlier. But another important aspect which we do on projects is we always have a project info booklet or a communication pack. And exactly like your contact list, that needs to be kept up to date, because as assumptions change, major risks change, new people come on board, you update that booklet, and when new people come on board, that onboarding or induction process just becomes so much easier. So the bit of advice I would give is have a dedicated person on your project that can give attention to communication. Now, this is an example of a project portal which we've set up. So it still speaks to communication and access to information. On the right-hand side, you can see a graphical representation of, we had the portal, which you can see on the left-hand side, which accessed the company intranet, as well as the project live link and projects online, and all the sub systems beneath that. So again, this sort of planning is really important, because if people don't have access to information, two things happen. One is they get frustrated, or two, they use the wrong information, which is not necessarily up to date. By having proper document management systems, and this system was a document management system, but it was also a communication system. So we also had the newsletters on here, etc. But if you wanted to get the right information, you went to the portal, and the portal took you to the right place, and you didn't have to worry about where do I get the stuff, because the portal guided the guys. Very important to have your communication and document control systems in place. Now, this is an example of meetings. Now, I'm still stuck on communication, because you've got decision making that flows from one meeting to another, instructions, as well as communication, feedback. And the picture on the right, and don't worry about the detail, but that's a high-level picture of what we typically draw up for a project. The complete meeting structure, right from the top, from the board meeting, right down to every single last major meeting on the project. Here we're talking about the recurring meetings. And as you can see in the middle, we typically define the project name, what the purpose of that meeting, when it's going to happen, what date of the month, and who would be the chairman. But again, having this, you just remove frustration and you remove uncertainty, which ultimately then leads to team effectiveness.
It also helps you that you don't have duplicate meetings, unnecessary meetings. We often find that same things are discussed in various places, and you really need a bit of a structure.
Absolutely. Now, we've already spoken about this picture, so I don't want to go through it again. I just wanted to remind you of the 4 environments and the prevention on the right-hand side. Now, if we go to the next slide, if you look on the left-hand side, you remember in the middle we had the signs and the symptoms. We've developed a survey, which is an online survey, which you can actually assess projects using this model. And in the, on the left, you can see that major symptoms that was experienced on this project was burnout, quality slip, and cost and schedule slip. And on the right-hand side, if you reflect back what you saw on the previous slide in terms of the work environment, the project environment, the job, and the personal environment, these little blocks are color-coded. And the ones that you see on the right-hand side in the red columns scored very high and red. So you can see organizational change is a major issue. The leadership is not in place. So there's a question around sponsorship. Because of the organizational change, things like job stability and job demands was an issue. The planning, organization, and project methodology. So you can see all the organization, all these supervisory and management functions weren't effectively being managed. So this helps you very quickly pinpoint where you need to go and focus your effort. And now if we go to the next slide, if we take this one step further, if you look at, previously I said we'd like to do these as prevention. Now in this case, you've identified problems, and now you can go and do mitigation using the same model. And you can say, well, if I now focus on framing and alignment and sponsorship or leadership, I'll get the best bang for buck by getting these issues resolved. So you can use the complete model. You will see I did put a link in the slides. If any one of you want to reflect afterwards, it actually takes you to the questionnaire if you are interested to look at the questions. Next one. Thank you, James.
Okay, so this is an example of an actual project. This was a project done in Louisiana. It was a project of around about $200 million. And it is not the comprehensive survey that Davida has just discussed, but a more simple one. We looked at 11 elements here that we surveyed sort of monthly, and then a little bit longer frequency later on. to just track how the team is doing, are the things important, are the right things addressed, and so on. So you, for example, see number one was around stakeholders and whether all the stakeholders understand what was going on. Number two was project leaders are clearly identified. Number three is the team understands the priority between cost, schedule, and other drivers of the project. And I think Davide has already referred to that the team must know what to focus on. Is it a cost very important? Is it time very important? What is important for the project? Do the people understand those? So I'm not going to go through all 11 of those elements. So on the right-hand side, you can see each of the elements from 1 to 11 and how the scores changed over time. So if we, for example, just look at number 2 there, you can see that the project improved and improved the score. So people knew who the leaders were, they knew what was going on. And suddenly you see that the green one, that measurement, suddenly a number of elements dropped. And this happened because the project was actually, as many projects, running late. The costs were running high. The people wanted to change the contracting strategy from a fixed price lump sum contract to a reimbursable contract halfway through construction. And we suddenly saw all these things starting to drop off. And what we then did is we started trying to focus on some of these key points where the scores start going low, as you can see there. So we spoke to the project leaders and explained that and where we're going. We try and say to make sure that the direction is still understood, where we're heading to, because there was a lot of uncertainty. And I think probably took us about 6 months or so to turn the project around again. In the end, it was completed within time. I think it was slightly over budget, but we could see which elements are the things that is causing uncertainty. You can see, for instance, number 6, alignment. Team alignment took a huge drop when all these uncertainties came in. So it was used as a tool to try and see where to focus in case things go wrong and to make sure those elements are properly addressed. So just a bit of an example of how we measured it and what we did during the project. Thanks, James.
Now, in this example, I'd maybe briefly like to talk about health and wellness. We typically do 2 sorts of health and wellness assessments on a project. Actual health assessments, which looks at blood sugar, blood pressure, cholesterol, etc. The second one talks more about wellness, and there we typically look at burnout or engagement. So there's a lot of research being done. If people are disengaged, they tend to not be motivated and they don't focus on what they have to do. And that leads to poor team effectiveness. So in this example, this was an example we did on a project that actually measured the burnout and the disengagement. What was interesting is when we analyzed all of the results from this particular survey, there was 2 issues that came out, and all the interventions that were initiated centered around communication and resourcing. A lot of it about meeting structures that wasn't effective. People didn't know what was going on. Assumptions changed. They didn't know what changed. And on the resourcing side, as we spoke about earlier about the project fatigue, leaders on the project were battling. They were suffering from burnout. So some of the initiatives we put in place there was to get some 2 ICs in to support these guys for the remainder of the project life cycle. Thank you. So in conclusion, and maybe while I'm going into the conclusion, if there's any questions, please pop those in so that we can cover them. We are at the end. So in conclusion, I said earlier, I'm going to briefly talk about team development. All of these things we spoke about, James, Davide, myself, and Freek, are about creating opportunities for team development. If you look at this picture on the right-hand side, you want to get the guys from forming through storming as quickly as possible, through norming, and ultimately to perform. So all of these initiatives for framing, for alignment, work sessions, clarifying roles, all of that is to try and get them through the storming as quickly as possible so that you can get these guys to perform. And you can look at the detail in these turquoise blocks. You use different methodologies in the various sections to make sure that people get motivated and get pushed through these. So keep team development in mind. Start with leadership. We spoke a lot about that. Framing and alignment, clear roles and responsibilities, effective management and control. Communicate, communicate, communicate. We can't say that enough. And then maybe one last thing around resourcing, which we haven't mentioned. And the numbers and competence are important, but the mentality of people you put on a project is very important. A project is very different from an operation. You always work against a lot of pressure to get things done, and especially where you're in a program and one project is dependent on another, very crucial that you get the right sort of person on board. And I think that is it from my side. Thank you, James.